primary return. No data block, no transponder, just a dot. Moving at 460 knots, 3 miles off the wing of a UPS 767. That's how it started. I need to back up. Albuquerque Center, Sector 92, high altitude, J-80 airway, the east-west corridor that cuts across the top of New Mexico. Tucumcari to Albuquerque, mostly cargo at that hour, mostly quiet. I'd been working the overnight desert sectors for 9 years by then. Before that, 13 years on the low-altitude stuff. Approach control, departure, the messy airspace around the sunport where you're stacking Southwest flights and hoping nobody busts the TFR around Kirtland. I transferred to the high sectors because I wanted simple, clean scope, wide spacing, the kind of flying where you put a target on J-80 at flight level 370 and you don't talk to them again until the sector boundary. March 2003, Wednesday overnight. I plugged in at 0300 Mountain. Decker gave me the position brief from the chair, headset still warm. 3 targets, UPS 1449, 767, westbound J-80, flight level 370, about 90 east of the Sunport. FedEx Heavy, MD-11, eastbound 350, he'll be through your sector in 20. Southwest Ferry at 310, southbound, already handed off to El Paso. He pulled his headset off and rubbed the red mark behind his ear. Quiet night. Enjoy it. I settled in. The scope was clean, green on black, the way I liked it. 3 targets, 3 data blocks, 3 transponder returns, painting right where they should be. The ARSR at Tucumcari was giving me good skin paint tonight. No atmospheric garbage, no ground clutter sneaking up from the desert floor. Clear sky above flight level 200. Some dust haze down low, but up high it was gin clear. The ATIS at Albuquerque was reporting winds calm, visibility unrestricted, altimeter 2992. I took a sip of coffee. It was already cold, Decker's coffee, the pot he'd made at midnight. Tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since Clinton was president. The HVAC hummed. The strip printer was quiet, just the sweep. Tick, tick, tick. 1 rotation every 4.8 seconds. The loneliest sound in the building at 3 in the morning. Albuquerque Center, UPS 1449, flight level 370, checking in. UPS 1449, Albuquerque Center, radar contact, altimeter 2992. 2992, UPS 1449, clean exchange. The 767 was running smooth, ground speed showing 462 on the data block. Normal for a westbound heavy at that altitude with light winds. I watched the FedEx MD-11 moving east on the opposite side of the scope. He'd be through the sector in about 18 minutes, plenty of lateral separation. I leaned back. This was the part of the overnight I used to like. The part where the scope was clean and the traffic was predictable and you could hear yourself think. Before that night, I thought the desert sectors were boring. After that night, I wish they had stayed that way. 0338. The sweep came around and there was a new return. No data block, no transponder code, no Mode C altitude readout, just a primary target, a skin paint return. Raw radar energy bouncing off something solid. It was sitting 3 miles east of UPS 1449, same heading, same speed, tucked in off the right wing like a formation wingman. I checked the flight data, nothing filed, no military activity scheduled, no TFRs, no restricted areas active in the sector at that hour. White Sands was cold, Kirtland had nothing up. I keyed up guard frequency. Aircraft on J-80 airway, flight level 370, approximately 90 miles east of Albuquerque. Squawk ident and contact Albuquerque Center on 132.45. Nothing. I tried 121.5. Unidentified aircraft J-80, vicinity of Tucumcari, contact Albuquerque Center. Static, the empty hiss of a frequency with no one on it. I called Kirtland approach on the landline. Kirtland, Albuquerque Center, Sector 92. You have anything up tonight? I'm painting a primary target on J80, no transponder, flight level unknown, 3 miles of BM UPS traffic. Negative, Sector 92, nothing scheduled, want us to check with the base? Affirm. 2 minutes later, Albuquerque, Kirtland. Base ops confirms no military activity, White Sands is negative as well. I thanked them and hung up the landline. Looked at the scope, the target was still there, 3 miles, same heading, same speed, not drifting, not closing, holding. I'd seen primary returns in the desert before. Atmospheric ducting, temperature inversions over the flat terrain can bounce radar energy off things that aren't really there, or paint things that are 200 miles away right on your scope. It happens. You learn to recognize it. Ducting returns drift, they fade, they don't hold formation. This one held formation. At Mach 0.82, with a 767, I picked up my coffee, realized my hand wasn't entirely steady, and set it back down. I keyed up the frequency, kept my voice flat. Procedure. UPS 1449 Albuquerque Center, traffic advisory. Traffic, you're 3 o'clock, 3 miles, altitude unknown, type unknown, NORDO, negative transponder. Pause. Then the UPS captain, calm, professional, the way cargo guys always sound at 3 in the morning because they've been doing this run for 15 years and nothing surprises them anymore. Albuquerque, UPS 1449 looking. Inhale, negative contact. Nothing visual. TCAS is clean. UPS 1449 Roger. I'm painting a primary return. You're 3 o'clock, 3 miles, co-altitude, same heading, same speed. Unable to establish communication. Copy. We'll keep looking. I watched the scope for 2 more sweeps. The target held, 3 miles, same speed, same heading, like it was bolted to the 767's wing. I decided to move UPS. Standard procedure. You can't talk to a NORDO, so you move the traffic you can talk to. UPS 1449, turn left heading 250 for traffic. Left 250, UPS 1449. I watched the 767's data block begin to drift left on the scope, and then I watched the primary return drift left, on the same sweep, not the next sweep, the same one. 0 delay. The NORDO target turned the instant UPS turned, before UPS could have completed even 2 degrees of bank. As if it didn't need to see the turn, as if it already knew. My hands stopped on the trackball. I stared at the scope for 3 sweeps. The 2 targets, one with a data block, one without, tracked left together, 3 miles apart, same rate of turn, same rollout heading, 250. Maybe it was just atmospheric propagation, a side lobe return from UPS itself, painting 3 miles off the real position. Radar does that sometimes. Multipath, refraction, the ARSR bouncing signal off a temperature layer and creating a false target. But side lobe returns don't turn. They smear, they wobble, they don't fly formation. I issued a second heading. UPS 1449, turn right heading 280. Right 280, UPS 1449. The data block turned right. The primary return turned right. Same sweep, same instant, 3 miles. I could feel the sweat building where the headset pressed behind my ear. The HVAC was humming the same note it always hummed, but now it sounded louder, like it was the only other thing in the room that was breathing. I picked up the landline and called my supervisor. Gary, come to 92. Gary Reeves, 28 years in the building. Nothing rattled Gary. He walked over with his coffee, leaned in, looked at the scope. What am I looking at? Primary return. No transponder. 3 miles off UPS 1449. It's been there since 0338. It matches every heading change. Same sweep. Ducting? Ducting doesn't turn when I issue a heading. Gary set his coffee down. He didn't pick it up again. At 0351, FedEx Heavy, a repositioning MD-11 eastbound at flight level 350 transited the area. Opposite direction, 2,000 feet below UPS. Albuquerque Center, FedEx 618 Heavy. FedEx 618 Heavy, go ahead. Yeah, center, we just passed something at our 11 o'clock low. Dark, no position lights, no strobes, no anti-collision. Couldn't make out a shape. Just something. Big though, big enough to block stars. I looked at Gary. Gary looked at me. The kind of look where nobody laughs but everybody understands. FedEx 618 Heavy, Roger. Copy. Thank you. I turned back to the scope. The target was still there. 3 miles off UPS. I decided to try something. I didn't tell anyone I was going to do it. I just keyed up and issued a heading, a real heading, a vector, from me to UPS 1449. But it wasn't for traffic. It wasn't for sequencing. It was a test. UPS 1449, turn left heading 240, left 240, UPS 1449. I watched the scope. The 767 began its turn, and the primary return, the thing with no transponder, no radio, no data block, no mode C, no identity, turned to 240 on the same sweep, not following, not reacting, simultaneous. It turned to the heading I assigned before the 767 could have completed the turn. As if it heard me, or as if it already knew what I was going to say. Gary's hand was on the back of my chair. I could feel him gripping it. Get UPS out of there, he said. I keyed up. Didn't hesitate. Emergency authority. UPS 1449, descend and maintain flight level 290, traffic type unknown, NORDO, co-altitude. Expedite descent. Descending to flight level 290, UPS 1449, expediting. The 767 began to descend, 2,000 feet per minute. I watched the data block altitude readout wind down, 370, 360, 350, and the primary return began to descend, same rate, same profile, following UPS down through the flight levels, 3 miles abeam, matching. Gary said one word, quiet, like he was talking to himself. What the hell is that? I didn't answer him. I was watching the scope, and the scope was watching me back. UPS descended through 350, 340, 330. The primary return descended with them. Same rate, same profile, 3 miles east. Then it stopped. The target held at flight level 370. UPS was passing through 320, pulling away below it. For 3 sweeps, the primary return sat motionless at 370. Then it moved, not like an aircraft. It accelerated. The scope doesn't give you ground speed on a primary return. No mode C, no transponder, nothing to calculate from. But I'd been reading radar long enough to know what 400 knots looks like versus 800. In 2 sweeps, that target went from holding to, I don't know. The spacing between returns was wrong, way too far apart for anything I'd ever tracked. Southwest toward White Sands, 4 sweeps and it was off my scope. Gary and I stood there. The HVAC hummed. The sweep kept going, tick, 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 painting a clean scope. 3 targets, all where they should be, as if the last 53 minutes hadn't happened. The landline rang. Kirtland Rapcon. They painted it too. 1,300 plus knots, then nothing. They were filing it as intermittent primary return, atmospheric anomaly. They suggested we do the same. Gary looked at me for a long time. Write it up as anomalous propagation, he said. Ducting event. Sign it, I'll co-sign. I wrote the report, signed it, Gary signed it. We both knew it was a lie. Ducting doesn't hold 3-mile formation. Ducting doesn't turn on a heading assignment. Ducting doesn't accelerate to 1,300 knots. But what were we going to write? I've read enough incident reports that went nowhere to know how that one would end. In a box. In a basement. Unfiled. That's the part I recorded 2 years ago. But there's more. My father, Robert Maddox, worked Albuquerque Center for 11 years, 1970 to 1981. I didn't know that until after he died. He never talked about ATC, never mentioned radar or the scope or the overnight shift. When I told him I was applying to the FAA Academy, he just looked at me and said, "Don't work the desert sectors." I thought he was joking. He died in August 2001. Heart attack. at 63. At the funeral, a man in a gray suit came up to me, retired FAA, said he'd been my father's area manager back in the 70s. He shook my hand and said, "Your dad filed a report once. They told him to lose it. He didn't lose it. He just stopped talking about it." Then he walked away. After the funeral, I cleaned out my father's garage. Behind the water heater, in a cardboard file box sealed with packing tape, one FAA incident report. Form 7210-4, dated March 11, 1974. Albuquerque Center, Sector 92, J80 Airway, flight level 370. A primary return, no transponder, pacing a TWA 707 westbound. 3 miles off the right wing, matching every heading change, for 41 minutes. Then acceleration, 1200 plus knots ground speed, southwest departure toward White Sands. The controller who filed it, Robert J. Maddox, my father. In the margin, in his handwriting, the handwriting I grew up seeing on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the note he left on the kitchen table the morning I drove to Oklahoma City for the academy. It came back. March 14th, 1987. I didn't file this time. My event was March 12, 2003. Same sector, same airway, same altitude, same behavior. 29 years after his first sighting, 16 after his second. I still have the box. It's in my den, next to this recorder. I keep the 1974 report in the top drawer of my desk. Sometimes I open the drawer and look at his handwriting, and I try to imagine him sitting where I'm sitting, recording something like this, trying to make someone understand what it's like to watch something on your scope that doesn't belong there, and know with absolute certainty that it knows you're watching. My daughter, Katie, started her FAA Academy paperwork last month. She wants to work center, she wants the overnight shift. She says the desert sectors sound peaceful. I haven't told her about the box. I don't know if I should. I don't know if it would change anything. Whatever moves along J80 at flight level 370 over the New Mexico desert, it was there in 1974, it was there in 1987, it was there in 2003, and it seems to find us. I turned the recorder off after that. Sat in the dark for a while. The HVAC was humming. It